Welcome to the Game Informer Show, a weekly podcast about video games and the video game industry. Join us every Thursday for a discussion about the latest gaming news, reviews, and exclusive reveals alongside Game Informer staff and special guests from around the industry. I am your guest host this week, Kyle Hilliard. I know it feels like I'm hosting a lot. I've hosted this week and last week, but Alex is under the weather. He's not feeling well, so I'm stepping in again to help him out. Today, I am joined by Just Marcus Stewart. What's up, Marcus?
Is that my nickname? Just Marcus Stewart is what they call me. Is that it?
Just Marcus Stewart. It's all you need, frankly. It's a Kyle and Marcus show, which you get every week on replay, but now it's the GI show.
Yeah, I'm not saying this out of vanity, but I think Marcus and Kyle has a better ring. You know, usually when you put the two-syllable name in front of the one syllable, it rolls off the tongue. Again, not a vanity thing. It's for the good of this show. This is the GI show, but it's also the Marcus and Kyle show.
That's right. I mean, some people would argue that Kyle is two syllables. I've never liked that.
Those people would be completely incorrect.
Okay, well, good. You know, I'm glad to have some an accurate decision made on that because it's plagued me my whole life. I like just one. But yeah, so it's a funky week because Alex is ill, and then we were gonna have Wes on as well, but then he is sick too at the last second. So I was like, you know what, Marcus, it's you and me, man. We're gonna do it.
We better record quickly before one of us gets sick.
I know, right? Okay, here we go. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake. On the release day of this podcast, the embargo went up at 2 a.m. last night, which is strange. But hey, everyone really seems to like it. And Marcus, you've been playing some of it, right?
Yeah, I'm up to Chapter 4 at the moment.
Okay, cool. So we'll talk about Resident Evil 4. I also want to talk about Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games that Nintendo needs to commit to bringing to its sort of, I don't know, what do you call it, the Nintendo Online
Nintendo Switch
store.
Online.
They're doing some weird stuff with it, if you can imagine, Nintendo. So I just wanted to kind of have an excuse to talk about old Game Boy games that we love. I wanted to check in on Wolong Fallen Dynasty one last time. I finally beat it, so I have some sort of conclusive thoughts about it. We are also going to talk about Exoprimal, which Marcus and I played a bit. The beta is now ongoing. Marcus and I played it in a closed setting, and now it's open to everyone. Let's see, WW2K23, Marcus is going to talk about that, and we're also going to hear more about Bayonetta Origins, because we can talk about it properly now, where last week we couldn't share the review score, and then, we'll sprinkle in some community stuff there. I got a lot of comments from the community about Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games, but, okay, here we go, Marcus. Let's dive into it. Resident Evil 4 Remake. Blake's review went live late last night, and he gave it a 9.5, and you can go read the text on the website. He loves it. It was funny because he messaged us on Slack within, I don't know, a couple hours of getting the code to the staff, and it was like, guys, this is incredible. Immediately he was like, I love this, and I've only played the demo. All I've played is the chainsaw demo. Marcus, you wrote the cover story, so you played a big chunk of the game in Japan a couple months ago, and then you have been playing the final release as well?
Yeah, I got the final release about a week ago, a code for it. And yeah, I was, if you read my cover story, I was super impressed with what I played there. And I have remained impressed with what I played before. Like I mentioned, I'm up to Chapter 4. I've already.
Can you contextualize that a little bit? What's going on in Chapter 4?
Yeah, it's probably worth doing that because they do change the chapter system compared to how the previous game worked. Because, the previous game had a bunch of sub-chapters. So Chapter 5 in the original game was basically the end of the game because there's all these sub-chapters within them of Chapter 2, 1, Chapter 2, 2. Whereas this one, thankfully, they do away with that. And they're just no, it's just regular chapter style. So Chapter 4 is right after I beaten the Del Lago, which is the big lake monster, the salamander thing. So I'm past that, and yeah, it's almost hard to find new ways to say that I really, really love this game. At least what I've played so far, It plays so well. It looks amazing. The enemies are tougher. Resident Evil 4 feels a bit scarier again, which it hasn't in a while, just from, age and having played it, a couple times. But seeing just the way the game, and Blake mentioned this in this review, and, obviously he's finished it, so he has a broader scope of this, but even in the time I played it, seeing areas that are faithfully recreated sort of one-to-one, but then turning a corner and seeing a new area, and you're like, oh, I don't think this was here before. Or maybe even going to an area that was there and you're seeing just new parts of it. Like, oh, this is a new room, or it's just bigger than it was before. It feels like they've struck a good balance of knowing when to do that. Of like, okay, this part, we're going to keep it the same. And then after this, we're going to do something new. And so far, it's felt so natural in a way that if your memory of Resident Evil 4 is a little hazier, you might not even notice that there's some new stuff.
Right.
And I don't think that's not a bad thing. That sort of is a compliment to how seamlessly the new stuff just slides into the existing framework of like, oh, this feels like this maybe should have always been here,
Yeah. I mean, like, again, you have more context than me, but even in the Chainsaw demo, which is the free demo that released, like, the house, the opening house is restructured. But like you said, there are sections of it that are identical. And it's one of the few games, I think, that, like, benefits from that because everyone knows it so well. Like, if you've played Resident Evil 4, like, you've probably played it more than once, and you probably know the layout of that world pretty well because it's pretty linear and straightforward.
Yeah. And this one's a little bit bigger, not like open world or anything, but just sort of,
right.
It's just wider spaces in some areas. What I love most is that stealth is so much more of a viable approach. Leon can crouch now, which he couldn't in the first game. Like the first game, or the original game, I should say, you could kind of stealth, but it was stealth in the sense of like, if I walk up to someone super quietly, maybe I can shoot them before they react. Whereas here,
so when you say stealth, like, you are still shooting them. It's not like you're knifing them in the back.
Oh no, you can't. No, you're knifing them in the back in the remake. Like there's a full.
And does that use like the knife currency? Like, do you lose a knife when you stab someone in the back?
It does drain some knife juice. You don't just lose it outright, but it does tick down because knives have durability now. You can carry multiple knives, which is something from the RE2 and 3 remakes. So it is a strategic choice, okay. But being able to thin the herd feels really nice, and some of the larger levels facilitate it in a nice way. I'm a player that if you give me stealth as an option, I'm almost always going to take it because I kind of put myself in the situation. Like realistically, I would try to be quiet and kill as many of these guys as I can, especially because it's so much easier to get overwhelmed in this game because the enemies, like the Ganados, they feel more rabid. Their movements are a lot more erratic. It's harder to hit them sometimes. And when they swarm on you, it's like, it feels like a fight for your life where you're like, heart is racing. You got like 10 dudes coming at you. One of them's maybe a chainsaw guy. Maybe one of them's the new bull man enemy. And you're like, okay, maybe I should have picked these guys off. Now, granted, you can go in guns blazing to anything. It's all about choice. And that's something that the original Resident Evil 4 did so well was, multiple approaches to conquering its challenges was such a big thing in that game. And yeah, it's just amplified here. The gunplay feels good. I really like the implementation of these side quests. I like going around looking for those blue flyers to, they give you little tasks, like the blue medallions from the first game where we worked in the side quest.
Is that a thing where, like, if you're within a chapter or an area, there's like, there's a side quest that you can only do there before you move on? Is that kind of how it's structured?
So I haven't run into it yet, but when I did the cover story, I asked the directors about, because you can revisit areas more in this game. In fact, you'll need to when you get Ashley, because you'll see even in that opening village part, you might have noticed this in the demo, Kyle, but there's one of the houses is only accessible with 2 people. Like you'll try it, there's like a ledge that you can't reach and you see the icon. So you're like, okay, I'm going to come, if you play the game, you're going to go back there. But the same is true for the side quests where you have a decent amount of time to complete the side quests within that area, but they are tied to that area. And you'll know when you're going to hit a point of no return when the merchant has specific dialogue sort of pushing you. Like he'll basically say something that suggests like, hey, maybe you should finish up whatever thing you got lingering in this area because you're about to move on to a point where you might not be here for a while or ever. You know, I would imagine it'll be the parts where you go to the castle or the island. But other than
I love that, by the way. That is like a trend in the last, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years that totally breaks immersion, but I absolutely welcome it. Where it's like, hey, heads up, you know, if you move on, you might not be able to go back. Like, I always appreciate that sort of heads up, you know? I love it.
Yeah, I want to hear how the merchant says it, because maybe it's not immersion breaking. Maybe he kind of says it in like in a way that makes sense of like, hey, oh, you're going to the island. Well, that's a long trip. You sure you don't want to, I don't know, finish those jobs? It's my merchant.
That's good, man. That's good. You were in the game, huh? That's
yeah,
good.
I like the new merchant VO, by the way. I like that.
Is it similar or is it like totally different?
It's similar, but it's a different performer. He's a lot chattier. He says a lot more than just the lines.
But he does say the lines.
He does say the line. I have heard, good. What are you buying? But it's not all the time. He only says it every now and then. Because, in the original, you could just spam it. Every time you just interact with him, he's like, what are you buying? Here he'll say like a bunch of other things, and then he'll slip in, what are you buying? So you go, like you do the Leonardo DiCaprio point of like, there it is.
Right, yeah. Or like, Leon's, it's like, where'd everyone go? Bingo? It's like, oh, he said it. He said the thing.
Yeah, Leon's still a big cheese ball in this game, which I appreciate. I think this game feels
it contextualizes it a little bit, which is like, I love that. It's kind of stupid, I guess you could argue, but and I'm going off the chainsaw demo where they're basically like, hey, Leon had a really freaking traumatic event, like, and the only way that he can deal with it is to be a cheese ball and like not think about it. And I was like, hey, game, thanks for putting that in there to give Leon some context for why he's accusing all these monsters of going to play bingo. It's because if he doesn't, he's just going to like lose his mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Spider-Man thing. That's the reason why he's so quippy in his fights. It's like both a distraction and just because he's dealing with some real stuff.
Yeah, he's probably fighting his uncle or something. He doesn't even realize it yet.
Is that the story? He fought his dead uncle?
No, I'm talking about Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't think that's how that story went. I don't think he fought Uncle Ben.
Hey, Spider-Verse, right? I mean...
we'll see when the sequel comes out if they do, yeah.
But I mean, what I'm getting at is Spider-Man always has like some extra layer of, emotional, like it's always like family or someone he's friends with sort of intersects with his life in a way that like, Batman doesn't have to deal with.
Right. And I guess maybe Leon doesn't have that. I mean, who does he have besides, I guess, Claire?
Yeah, he's got Claire, and I guess they adopted that little girl at the end of the Resident Evil 2 remake. I don't know. Is he taking care of her? I don't remember that character.
Dropped her off in an orphanage and called it a day.
Right.
It's like my work here is done. But overall, I'm having so much fun. I'm so excited to finish. I haven't had a ton of time to play because of just been busy reviewing the two games we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I've been so impressed. Just again, visually, gameplay wise, it is. I think I agree with Blake's review where he said it doesn't overwrite my memory of the original game. But I said this in my cover story where it feels like it came from an alternate reality where Resident Evil 4 debuted this year instead of 2005. Like this is the first time Resident Evil 4 came out because it has all the modern tweaks and just all the flourishes that just make it a better playing game and just a more palatable experience in the ways that it needs to be.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. It's interesting because like Resident Evil 2 remake, like totally rethought Resident Evil 2, right? It's completely different. But the remake of Resident Evil 1, like I'm talking about the GameCube remake,
right?
It almost feels closer to that, where it's like, hey, we fully acknowledge everything you know about the original game, and we're going to play with those expectations and make something really interesting for you. And it sounds like, from Blake's review and from your thoughts on it so far, that Resident Evil 4 kind of feels like that. Like it's a pair with the original game. Like you benefit from playing the original game going into this new experience. And I'm guessing even if you've never played 4, then you get just this awesome horror action game in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I could see it being a strong GOTY contender right now.
All right, cool. Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, I'm really excited to play. Yeah, I played through the demo twice, and that's been my experience so far. So I can't wait. Cool. So Resident Evil 4 Remake. One more plug for Blake's review on the site. He gave it a 9.5 and was really had a lot of wonderful things to say about the game. And he's not alone. I think IGN and both IGN and GameSpot gave it a 10. Like, oh, wow. So I think they're like critics love it. So,
is that what it says at the bottom of the website? It's a little ad that says critics love it.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so let's move on. I want to talk about Game Boy games a little bit. Nintendo has added, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games to its Switch Online services. Like a few weeks ago. It has since added Metroid Fusion to the original batch, and Kirby's Dream Land 2. Which are great. Like more of those. But it also, I don't know if you saw this, Marcus, which was kind of the reason I even wanted to talk Game Boy games. It also added Burger Time Deluxe from the Game Boy, which is totally fine. I'm not looking a gift horse in the mouth, but it is such a strange choice, considering the library of Game Boy games that they went with, like Burger Time, like a Game Boy port of an arcade game.
Yeah, it's like sometimes. I mean, whenever they have a choice like that, when they update those libraries, sometimes I wonder, like, maybe this isn't a matter of we think this is what people want. It's just a matter of this was the easiest game to either relicense or emulate for this system.
Maybe. Yeah,
and we need to fill this month with something.
I mean, they could have just done Kirby's Dream Land, though, and I think people would have been happy, right? Or Kirby's Dream Land 2 is what it is. In the same way they added Metroid Fusion to the Game Boy library, they added one Game Boy Advance game. They could have just added Kirby's Dream Land 2. It would have been fine. And Burger Time's great. Like, yeah, I'll take that extra as well. But it's just so odd. But it just made me kind of want to sit down and like think about what games specifically I want to see come to the service at this point. There's a couple that we know are coming. So on Game Boy, they're adding Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons and Ages, which is great because I've actually never beaten those games. I've only dabbled with them.
I've never played them, and I think I bought them on my 3DS because they were on that virtual console, but then I just never got around to playing them. But those are probably two of the few Zeldas I've never touched at all.
Right, yeah. So those are coming. Pokemon Trading Card Game is coming. And then Kirby Tilt and Tumble, which is one that I'm weirdly excited about because that's like a motion-controlled Game Boy game that I thought there would be no way to ever play that outside of actual Game Boy. So yeah. I'm excited that that's coming to Switch. And then Game Boy Advance is getting Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Fire Emblem, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, and Golden Sun. So those are the games that we know are coming to the service. And Marcus, I've requested that you bring in 3 Game Boy or Game Boy Advance games that you really want to see come to the service, and then I actually also have a bunch from the community games that they want to see. So why don't you kick it off with one of the games that you want to see come to the service?
Okay, full disclosure, I might have forgotten this assignment, so I'm going to be thinking off the top of my head. But
I can start if you want.
Well, you know what? I have one, and I'm going to speak on behalf of a ton of people. Throw those Pokemon games, Red, Blue, and Yellow. I'll count them as one. Because they're basically the same game.
Yeah, they are.
And speaking as someone that I have the most affection for first gen Pokemon, I haven't really kept up with the series beyond Gen 2. I haven't played really the games, but I hope we get Red, Blue, and Yellow sooner than later because it took a long time for them to even get added to 3DS. It was almost towards the end of the 3DS life cycle that they were like, okay, you can finally have these games you've been screaming at us about. So let's maybe not do that this time and just give the people what they want, man.
Yeah, I worry that those just aren't going to come because Nintendo is going to be like, well, we can charge for these, which they can. They absolutely can. People will buy them individually happily. But I worry that will prevent them from adding it to the service, and then they just won't come at all. You know what I mean? And then they just won't exist on Switch, which would be a huge bummer. But I mean,
if they want if they see subscription numbers slipping, that's certainly one way to boost them up.
For sure. Yeah. So I hope those come. My one pick, I had a admittedly incredibly selfish, very specific to me pick, is Golden Sun: The Lost Age. Golden Sun is coming, right? But let's just skip Golden Sun and go right to the sequel, because I just so happened to have played Golden Sun for the first time, like 5 months ago. I got my Game Boy Advance out and played the full game on Game Boy Advance. And the way that game works is after you beat it, you get this really long code that's like 30 characters or something like that. And you can start The Lost Age, and you can input that code, and then you get all kinds of like items and character details and stuff from the first game that goes right into the second game. And since I have that code, like, just don't worry about Golden Sun 1. Let's just skip right to The Lost Age, because that's the one I actually want to play. I played Golden Sun recently. I don't need to play it again. I just want to play The Lost Age.
I mean, how many Golden Sun games were there on GBA?
There are 3.
3?
There are 2 on Game Boy Advance and 1 on DS. And I have a weird history with them where, like, I played the original a lot when it came out, but then my Game Boy Advance got stolen, so I never beat it. So it's always been this like thing that, like, for years and years and years, I was like, I need to beat Golden Sun to like close this loop on my life. So I finally, like, in the last like year, I bought a copy on eBay and like broke out a Game Boy Advance and played through it. And then I bought The Lost Age as well after I finished it, and I actually took the time to input the code, so I have it ready to go. But like, if I could play it on my Switch, my life would be a lot easier. So let's get The Lost Age on Switch right away. I know, Marcus, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but do you have another one?
I do. This is a game I've never played, but I've always wanted to, and that's Astro Boy Omega Factor. I remember when have you played it, Kyle?
A little bit, yeah. I played it like a couple hours when it came out, yeah.
Okay, because I remember when it came out, I remember it reviewed super well, and it was kind of a surprise where we were like, this is super good. I think IGN gave it like a 9. I don't know what Game Informer gave it, but I remember wanting to play it, and this was during the time that Astro Boy, at least, was kind of in a revival phase. Like, he had that new... I don't know if it was
movie.
A new... Yeah. Was it... Wait, was it... I think it was before the movie, wasn't it? Wasn't the movie like late?
Maybe you're
second
right.
half of the 2000s? Because this was
you
like...
might be right. Yeah, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, but I just remember this was when Astro Boy was airing on Toonami, and that was the first time I'd ever watched it. Like, I had heard of it.
That aired on Toonami?
Yeah, it was on Toonami for a while. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it after, like, being aware of Astro Boy, but...
how did that... how old were you? You were, like, what, high school-ish? Or
this would have been high school by the time this came, because this was, like... This wasn't during what I remember as peak Toonami, which is, like, early 2000s, like, when Dragon Ball Z was on, and, like... Trigun. I think it was like a couple of years. I think we were on Tom number 2 at that point when Astro Boy came, but my memory might be wrong.
I have like a Funimation subscription, and Astro Boy is on there, and I pulled up a random episode. I was like, oh, what does this look like? And it was like, that is an old cartoon.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like...
What was it, 80s? 80s, right?
Yeah, like it was like pre-Speed Racer even, I think, right? Something like that. Like it is like that sort of anime cliche where it's like they're really only doing a 3 drawings a minute or so, as opposed to like 24 a second. At least that was my perception of it. But that's funny that you were watching it back then.
Yeah, but
and by the way, you are right. The movie didn't come out till like 2009.
Okay.
So yeah, so it was. You're right. They were giving it some kind of small scale reboot or something. It was very strange.
Yeah, and I've always wanted to play the game because it looked cool, but by the time I would have wanted or been able to play it, because I lost my Game Boy Advance kind of early in its life cycle. I had it stolen from me. It's a whole story. But when I had
a similar story about our Game Boy, apparently. All right.
Yeah, right. But I had a DS Lite, so I could play Game Boy GBA games. But I remember looking online at the time to see how much it cost, and it being pretty expensive because I guess it's just sort of a rare game. I don't know where it stands now. It's probably I doubt it's gotten cheaper since then. But
yeah, let's look it up.
I know I imagine that would be a licensing thing, with whoever, I don't know, the company that owns Astro Boy, who makes Astro Boy. But I would love to see a gem like that resurrected on a modern platform.
So I pulled it up on eBay, and like you can't really use eBay as a metric for prices because you can set it at any price, you know? Like you really have to look at recent sales, but like so with that caveat, the first one I pull up, it's selling for $450.
Oh my god.
Complete case and everything like that. Yes. So yeah, that would be a great one to bring to Switch.
Yeah, it might not be great for the person selling it because the value is going to plummet the moment you make that game readily available for everyone. But
yeah, that's not our problem, right?
No.
Let's see. My number. Well, I don't have these numbered really, but another one that I really want to see come to Switch is Drill Dozer, which is like far and away my favorite non-Pokemon Game Freak game, and even as like a maybe even my favorite Game Freak game, if I'm being honest with myself, because I like Pokemon quite a bit, but I'm not as nostalgic for it as most people. I was a little bit old for Pokemon. But Drill Dozer is just this great like puzzle platformer with a fun story about like this family of thieves, and it's just really well made. It's one that was like set up for a sequel at the end, but it never got one. I love Drill Dozer. I would love more people to get a chance to find it and really fall in love with it, because I really do think like next to Pokemon, it's Game Freak's most like interesting and fun game with like a completely separate universe that I think is fun with characters that I like and stuff like that. So Drill Dozer for Game Boy Advance is the other one I really want to see come to the service. And I imagine, unlike Astro Boy, they'll probably be easier to bring over because it's not like they need to license the Drill Dozer IP. I'm sure Nintendo probably owns it for all I know. I don't know how that stuff works, but
was Drill Dozer? Is that a Capcom IP? Who made
Drill Dozer?
Yeah, who is Drill Dozer? Who owns Drill Dozer? Who makes those?
I mean, I think it was Nintendo published.
Was it?
Game Freak developed, Nintendo published.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why
Game Freak developed, Nintendo published. Yeah, so
I don't know why I thought Capcom for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, honestly, it has that look where like if you handed it to me and said this is a Capcom game, I believe you. Just
it's got a Mega Man-y look to it, maybe something about it.
Yeah. What else you got, Marcus?
Well, you know,
one more.
Speaking of Mega Man, or actually, I'm gonna go another way. I was gonna say a Mega Man game. I'm gonna switch. Sonic Advance. In my opinion, the only good Sonic games of the 2000s during that rough just stretch of stuff like Shadow the Hedgehog and all the BS 3D Sonic games like Sonic and the Black Knight and just not a good time for Sonic the 2000s by and large. But quietly on the side, unbeknownst to a lot of people, there were 3 Sonic Advance games that were pretty dang solid. I would love to see at least one of those come over.
It's the original,
yeah. I don't know. I couldn't tell you which one's the best one just because it's been so long since I played them. But I remember all 3 of them being like at least good. So pick one. I mean, start with the first one, I guess. But if you want to pack them up and just release them as a bundle, that'd be great. It's not going to happen, but
well, I mean, I don't know, because the other thing about this thought experiment was like there are all the Mega Man games and like even like the Mega Man X re-releases and like Yoshi's Island re-releases and stuff, but it's like there are ways to play a lot of those on Switch. Like you can get all the original Mega Man games on Switch, but I guess I don't, now that I'm saying this out loud, I don't know if you can. Yeah, the Game Boy games are different,
but not
right?
because of Nintendo. That's just because Capcom like put out those collections, or you got to wait for like the publisher to do it themselves. You know,
or and like the other one else, Konami doing like the Castlevania. Like you can get them even if you have to pay for them, which is like I'd like them to exist rather than not exist. But now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if the Mega Man Game Boy games are available in like a collection or something like that on Switch. I don't know.
I don't think they're a part of those 2 like compilations they did. I think those are just the NES games, and then the one they did for the X series. But Sonic Advance. Those games I don't think have really ever been ported very much. I think they might have been on like the They might have been on the Wii U Virtual Console. I don't remember because those had GBA games too.
I don't think
Or
so,
maybe-
because I actually pulled up my Wii U recently and went and bought like a bunch of games.
Okay.
Which, by the way, I bought Devil's Third. Might be a good replay candidate in the future. There,
Oh man,
Marcus.
I've always been curious about that full game.
Oh,
I
me
was just
too.
talking about that game recently, actually, with someone. 'Cause I was at a comic
really?
book store and someone asked about Itagaki and what he's doing, and I was like, "That was his last thing." Was
Yeah.
that?
What he I think, you know what? I think he was talking about NFTs recently.
Oh, that's.
I think that was like
that
the last
sounds
we heard
right.
from
Actually,
Itagaki.
that sounds like that's what modern Itagaki would get into.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I got us sidetracked. I don't think Sonic Advance is on Wii U, but it
Yeah.
should be.
Put him on Switch. Do
Put
it.
them on Switch. My last one is a Game Boy game as opposed to Game Boy Advance, which is Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, the original Wario Land,
It's a great game.
which I love. They put a Wario Land game. I think it's
4, wasn't it?
Four on Game Boy Advance, which is cool.
Yeah, which-
But the original is just the one that I love. I played that more than Mario, just in the timing of my childhood. Of like, I owned Wario Land, but I didn't really own any other Mario games. Except I did have 6 golden coins, but Wario Land I ended up playing a lot more. So I would that would just be like another selfish like nostalgia blast for me. It's just to have an opportunity to play Wario Land again on my Switch. I think it is one that I bought on my 3DS, and I think I played and beat again. But yeah, love Wario Land,
Yeah.
Super Mario Land.
That's the last
3.
time I played and beat it too. Was the 3DS
3DS
port
yeah.
of it.
Is that one that you played like originally, like when you were young, or did you come to it later?
I played a little bit of it when I was younger, but I didn't own it. I think I borrowed it from a friend. But I remember that. I just remember in that time, because, Wario was introduced in those Game Boy games.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember being very confused by Wario just conceptually.
Just as
like,
an idea.
yeah, like, what is he? Like, he's like, I get that he's like bad Mario, but I don't know. I remember I used to literally ponder Wario's existence and like what he offers or what he brings to the table or what his powers were compared to Mario's and stuff. Like, I don't know. It's probably the deepest anyone's ever thought about what Wario was like 9-year-old me.
Yeah. Well, he was. Yeah. I mean, we get him now. We all understand. He likes garlic and
Money.
He farts and stuff. But back then, we didn't know all those things about him. You know.
Yeah,
We
and
just
then
knew he liked
Waluigi
money.
came along and stole his thunder, where I was even more confused, and I still want to know more about Waluigi.
Something I love about that game is you, depending on how much money you have when you finish, dictates like what kind of house you get in the end. So like if you die a lot and you end the game with like 10 coins, you just have a birdhouse. But if you have like 900 coins by the end of the game, you have like a mansion. And there's like all these different, I think there's like a handful of even in between those two spectrums. Like there's a bunch of different houses you could end up with. And when I was a kid with like nothing else to play, like that became its own weird game of like, I got to see, like I'm going to end with this number of coins and see what kind of, living domicile I get. Then Mario comes and steals it, I think, if I remember correctly. I think he just shows up at the end and like steals it. I need to revisit that one.
See, they need to remake that or revisit that idea, but in a modern context where Wario gets really into NFTs. Because he would
Don't
totally
give that idea.
be
No, don't even bring it up.
He would totally, like, it could be a commentary about how bad NFTs are because this villain really likes them because, he's greedy. But the twist is that the game is secretly farming cryptocurrency on your Switch.
Oh, no. We don't want that. No, thanks. Okay, so I have a bunch of bonuses, and you can throw in bonuses as well, Marcus, as they come to you. But I asked the Game Informer communities for some suggestions, and I got actually a lot. So I'm going to run through these kind of quickly.
Okay.
Nick DiPaolo from these are going to this first batch is from the Overblood Facebook group. Said Boktai, baby, solar power on my Switch. I don't know how they could do that, but I'm open to it. I played Boktai for the first time in the last few years.
So it's a
weird
simple
game.
firmware update. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'd love them to try. Donkey Kong 94 says Nick Ludeman, which is like
I played that, yeah.
Yeah, like which I've heard for years is like you think it's just like Donkey Kong on Game Boy, like a port of an arcade game, but it's like no. There's like there's so much more to it than that. And it's like the first time Mario was like doing backflips and triple jumps and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have that on my 3DS, and that's the first time I'd ever played it, and that game's fun. Yeah,
I want to play more of that. Let's see. Derek Mallow says Sword of Mana, Castlevania, Bomberman, any of the RPGs really.
Yeah.
Steve.
Well, Castlevania, they did a collection of those GBA games.
Yeah, Aria of Sorrow and Harmony of Dissonance and Circle of the Moon, all three of them. It's called
they're all. I mean,
Selection.
like you have to buy them. I would like what's the Game Boy Kid Dracula?
Yes, I had that on my sort of bonus list. Yeah, Kid Dracula is a weird one.
Get that in there.
Yeah. Steve Lusador just shared a screenshot of this box art I've never seen before for a game called Faceball. I don't know what that is.
Faceball?
Yeah. Chris Fader says Cool Spot, which I've heard is a good platformer.
I didn't know there was a Game Boy port of that.
Yeah. There's this game, again, I'd never heard of it. It was a Game Boy Color game, and it's called Trubballs. Like it's like a pun between the word balls and trouble. Trubballs.
Is it spelled with a Z at the end?
No, it is spelled with an S, and the box art is just like, it looks like a still from an old like movie from like the 40s of a guy holding a bomb. I don't even know if this one's real.
This is a gritty World War II game.
Yeah. Nate McKellen says Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel.
Yes.
Yes.
I've always wanted to play that. Never have.
I played it in 2019 for the first time. I streamed it.
Is it good?
I played Boktai and Metal Gear because I was trying to play like obscure Game Boy games.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It holds up. It's interesting. It's a well done port of like the interesting ideas from Metal Gear Solid into a Game Boy game, and it's cool. I would love to see that come to Switch. Let's see a couple more of these. Dragon Ball Z Legendary Super Warriors from Matt Clark.
Not Legacy of Goku?
I'm not seeing Legacy of Goku.
Well, I'm going to toss that in that the Legacy of Goku game should get in there.
Yggdra Union from James Johnson suggests another Ghost Babel. Pokemon Pinball from our Philip Provencia. Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff there. And then I also want to share some suggestions from Discord as well. Mini Elnef says Pokemon Gold and Silver, right? Like all of those Pokemon games we want to see come for sure. Logan on Discord said Batman Return of the Joker, and he says Batman plus Ninja Gaiden. Is he saying that the game plays like Ninja Gaiden, I think?
The most I know about it is God, years ago I watched the Angry Video Game Nerds Batman retrospective, and he played that, and it's very Ninja Gaiden. Is that it's a side scroller. He has the sort of wall to wall bounce that Ryu Hayabusa has. I believe is
it in the Batman Beyond?
No, just this before that. This is like the animated series was going, but I think the most recent movie might have been Batman Forever. Like it's even before Batman and Robin, so like mid 90s. Yes, but this is more like, from what I remember, like comic book Batman.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leafeon says Rhythm Tengoku, which yes, I would love for them to localize that for America finally. Rhythm Tengoku.
I don't know that one.
It's the original Rhythm Heaven. Like it was called Rhythm Heaven in America, and the first time we actually got a localized Rhythm Heaven was for DS, but there was a Game Boy Advance game.
Okay.
Which I actually on Etsy in the last like year or two bought a fan translated version that they put onto a cart. So I was able to play it for the first time recently. So basically they take a ROM and they fan translate it and they put it on a cart, and then you can buy the cart and then you can just put it in your Game Boy and play. Which is also how I played Mother 3 recently. I haven't beaten it, but I played that as well. Again, and another one that needs to come.
I was going to say, that's probably the ultimate answer, right?
Like we all need to unsubscribe so that Nintendo finally is like, oh, this will get him back. Mother 3 on Game Boy Advance.
That might be the best chance we get it. Like tying GBA games to an extra, like an expensive subscription tier. Yeah. If they really wanted to, I mean, maybe I'm overinflating how known Mother 3 is, and sort of like, I don't know if it's like a mainstream demand.
It might be one of those like super niche, but the people who want it are very vocal, might be one of those kind of situations.
But yeah, it would definitely be like, I can think of few better incentives besides the Pokemon games than localizing Mother 3 and putting it on, or even just releasing it in Japanese and just like even them just being like, yeah, we don't care, here it is, figure it out.
Yeah, I mean they've done that a couple times. Like there's a couple Japanese games that are just on there, but they're usually puzzle games. Mother
how bad
3
do you want it?
Would be tough.
I played Panel de Palm on Switch.
Yeah, same.
That game's great, and I don't understand anything I see.
Yeah. Matt Storm, frequent podcast editor, and he's a friend of the show. He's been on a couple times. He called out Wario Land 1 and 2, so we know he has good taste. Good job, Matt. And let's see. Time Thief says Resident Evil Gaiden, which the Resident Evil Gaiden's a weird one. Am I understanding correctly? That game did come out, right? I'm not crazy.
I'm pretty sure it did. I've never played it.
All right, yeah, because it's got Leon in it, and he's on a boat, I think. It's
like Resident Evil Revelations.
Yeah, kind of. Like I would love. That's like in the same way. Cause the one on Discord, on our Discord channel, Time Thief called it out like alongside Alone in the Dark, which was such a weird inclusion to have Alone in the Dark on the Switch online service. I don't know if you touched that game, Marcus, but it's weird. Like I only played it for like 5 minutes, but it's really strange.
I'm meaning to because it's the same reaction of like, why is this here? Is this like a hidden gem that I wasn't aware of?
It's an impressive showcase of like Game Boy Color tech. It was kind of my takeaway from it for my very short time with it. But yeah, Resident Evil Gaiden. And then we'll finish up here just with a bunch of like bonus ones that I want to see. Game Boy Advance. I want to see Advance Wars. I want to see. Oh wait, I wrote my list all weird.
I wonder if that'll ever happen when we got those remakes coming out soon.
I don't know. But Advance Wars, both of them, I've never played them. Metroid Zero Mission, which is rumored to have come. People have found like screenshots of the game, like looking in the back end of the Switch and stuff like that. So that seems like it's on the way. And then another really kind of selfish one is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for the Game Boy Advance specifically. Yeah. That was like a launch game for the Game Boy Advance, and it was like all I had for my Game Boy Advance for a long time. And I freaking love that game.
I've heard it's pretty good, right? Like
it was my first like true Tony Hawk experience, because then I came to the other ones like later. I wasn't there at the beginning for Tony Hawk. And then Game Boy, we talked about Kid Dracula. I want to see Dr. Mario, Mario's Picross. Pocket Bomberman is a game I really loved. The original Super Mario Land, the Donkey Kong Land games. And then a game I never played, Tetris 2. Let's take a look at that thing.
Tetris
Why does it have
2.
A 2 on it? What did it do to deserve the 2? I don't know.
I don't like that. I don't like putting numbers next to Tetris. It just sounds like a fake video game.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to move on to some modern games now. I wanted to check in one last time. Maybe not one last time. Maybe we'll talk about it more in the future. But Wolong Fallen Dynasty, I finally finished. It was
done.
Much longer than I expected. I think I even said on this very show that I was like, it's not that long. It's pretty short. It's long. I think it was like 30 or 40 hours I ended up putting into it. But I really like Wolong. I think we'll see how the whole year shakes out, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be on my top 10 list. I think it's too long. I would have liked to see it shorter. And then the last 3 major bosses, I did call in online help because I was just kind of getting exhausted. Of like every boss up to that point I had done on my own or with the AI partners, but by the end I tried the last few bosses like 2 or 3 times, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to progress. I don't
it's
really
not
want to
cheating. It's a system in the game for you.
It's built into the game, but I can't help but feel like I'm cheating myself of the full experience. I don't know. That's my own problem to deal with. But I just wanted to shout out Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Cool game. If you like Souls-likes and you like Team Ninja, right? That's who developed it. Right?
Yep,
now
Team Ninja.
Yeah. Cool game. I have no idea what was happening in the story. Could not even tell you a single character name other than Lubu, because he was like a really difficult boss.
Yeah.
But
same as in real life, apparently.
Yeah, that's right.
At least according to the stories, apparently he was a beast.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder, Kyle, do you think this encourages you to want to check out the Neo games?
Not really. I mean, maybe I should.
They're very similar.
Yeah, I don't know, because like they're closer to Dark Souls, right?
No, not really. They're like Wulong gets it's pretty much an evolution of Nioh, but it's the same sort of like the same level layout in terms of like the level select, same fast pace, same general combat style of like collecting loot, different stances. Like it just doesn't have the elemental thing that Wulong has, but it's got its own like, you know, instead of that you're like summoning spirit demons to do stuff. Like it's got a very similar DNA. I feel like if you like one, you will like the other.
Okay. Is it like, but the thing I like about Wulong is like the countering.
Okay, there's not really that. Like that's kind of the main thing.
That was the big hook for me for Wulong. I think I love countering.
Yeah, I haven't played Nioh in a long time, but yeah, I don't think from what I remember parrying, like it doesn't have a dedicated parry system the way that Wulong has. But I mean, everything else that is kind of there. So I don't know. I think it might be worth
I should
dipping into to see what you think. Yeah. If you want more of that.
Because like the other thing is like the loot side of it. Didn't engage with that at all in Wulong. Could not care.
Isn't there an auto button to be like, just give me the best things I have? Right.
But the thing is like I just upgraded my starter stuff mostly, and I was like happy with that.
I mean, like, if that's a viable approach.
Yeah, which is cool. Like I like that was a viable approach. But I literally hit the max amount of like armor I could carry because like I just didn't care. I wasn't selling it. I wasn't like, you know,
you just
throwing it away for parts. I was just like grabbing stuff and carrying it around, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, you can't pick up any more swords. And then I had to go to like the merchant and be like, here, you want to buy like 1,000 swords? Like I just want to be able to pick some up. So like, if that's like Neo's kind of hook, is like, yeah, loot. It's like, well, I don't care.
It's one of the main, like that's where Wulong gets it from, is that game. I don't think it's more of a focus than Wulong. It's like the same emphasis, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
I think you can do the same thing of just upgrading your existing stuff. Actually, no, you totally can. Like, there's a whole upgrade system the same way of like, I just like this. I'm just going to make this the best thing and never use anything else. Yeah, I think you should give those games a shot. I'd be curious to see what you think of them.
Yeah, I was always kind of scared of like the Souls-like impersonators because it's like, it's not as good as the real thing. And like, I would argue that Wulong is not, but at least this makes me a little more like intrigued and like maybe I should get out of my bubble and try some of these other games.
Yeah, you know? In my opinion, the Nioh games are the best Soul-likes, and especially because they still feel like their own thing. Like they don't just feel like just pure copies of Dark Souls. They like it feels like Ninja Gaiden with Dark Souls because of the pacing. Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I should give those a shot. Maybe if they announce Nioh 3, I'll dive in, right? Like I will play that one.
Well, that's going to be a while because Team Ninja has that game Rise of the Ronin coming out next year. That's their next thing.
Which that game looks cool too. Yeah.
It does look really cool.
Yeah. Marcus, I want to talk a little bit about Exoprimal.
Yeah.
I played the beta. I think. Did you play any more, or is it basically what you played is when you and I played together for the
just what we did.
Okay, we played like 2 full matches.
Yeah.
I didn't. Exoprimal is such a weird thing because like it was announced and I can't get away from the part of it that's like, shouldn't this be Dino Crisis? Which is like, who cares? But like for some reason I just can't get that out of my brain. And then the game you look at and it's like, this looks so weird. There are like dinosaurs pouring out of like floating water bubbles in the sky, and it's just like, it's a cool visual. And then when I finally sat down to play the beta, I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is kind of like Left 4 Dead. Is sort of the closest like line I can draw, where it's like you and a team versus just tons of enemies. Maybe even a little Dynasty Warriors if you're playing the class that has the sword. But my reaction has been like positive. Like I like what we played. I'm not the biggest multiplayer guy. I'm not the biggest person in terms of like playing matches of any game, really. Like I don't even really get into like Overwatch or Fortnite that much or anything like that. But the bones that are there are cool and interesting, and like the visual sort of identity of the game is fun. Of just seeing hundreds and hundreds of raptors like fall out of the sky. And then like there's a couple different classes. I call him the sword guy. I don't know his actual name, but to run into just a horde of raptors and just swing your sword, it's pretty satisfying. So I wanted to know, kind of like, having some time to reflect on it, Marcus, like what you thought of the beta. Like, what did you think? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I had fun with it. You mentioned before, it's such a visual delight just seeing dinosaurs popping out of just the sky. Like the little scene we watched with the thousands of raptors falling down that skyscraper might be my favorite visual just image or scene of anything this year. Like it's gonna be up there because it's funny because so ridiculous.
The narrator for your matches, which is like an AI, was even like, I don't remember exactly what the dialogue was, but it was like, look at this thing, it's beautiful, like you need, like, isn't this amazing? And your reaction as you look up into the sky is like, yeah, it kind of is actually.
It's like beautiful and horrifying, I guess.
But,
I'm not a huge multiplayer guy either, Kyle. There's very few that I've ever stuck with for very long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this will be that, but it was more Overwatchy as well than I expected.
Especially with the classes.
Yeah, like the classes, the way you can change classes mid-match and the way they're divided of like, okay, you're assault, you're medic, you're this, tank. I mean, one of the classes, was it Roblox, has like the Reinhardt shield.
Right. Yeah.
And Overwatch is a game that I've enjoyed. Like, it was one of those few multiplayer games that I stuck with for a bit. And like the makeup of the matches where they all, it's a combination of cooperating with your team to do the objectives while also, competing with the other team to get it done. And I was like, oh, this is very Overwatchy. Okay. I can click with that. I can get down with that,
Yeah. It's like a language that you kind of speak, right? It's like it at least gives you like, I kind of know the basics here.
Right. I mean, there's one mission that was like basically like a payload thing, right? Where we're escorting the vehicle, and you're like, oh, okay, I know what this is. And I think it plays pretty well just from like a control standpoint. It looks pretty nice. I just like how delightfully stupid the game is. Like, and I think it knows that it's dumb. And that's what I appreciate it most. I don't think it's taking itself seriously, and it's not aware how dumb I think it knows how absurd it is. That's the vibe that I get, at least.
Yeah.
And I like that. I want to see the full game. Like, I want to see the full breadth of all the different modes, how many there are. I have no idea if they've talked about post-launch, like, will we see more classes the way Overwatch did of, like, more mech suits or whatever. And I'm also most curious about the story, because the last trailer they put out was very narrative focused. Like, it's like full-on cutscenes. There's like a time travel, time loop thing going on. And it, honestly, just the stupidity combined with the sort of like maybe unironic cheese of the performances, it gave me like some really strong binary domain vibes. If you ever played that game.
Yeah, is that a Capcom game as well?
That was a Sega game.
Okay, I never played it, but I'm familiar with it. I know it has its hardcore fans.
I like that game. It's so dumb, but it's an enjoyable, incompetent sort of like Gears of War clone. Probably the best way you can describe it. But it gave me.
By the way, sorry, it is Sega. You're absolutely right, but it's an RGG game.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I never would have guessed that in a million years.
We need the crossover. We need Big Bo and Kiryu to go fight some robots together.
That's so funny.
But yeah, it gave me some binary domain vibes. The cutscenes they were showing, and at first I was like, is there going to be like a narrative, like a solo mode where you play through this story? Because I would love that, and I don't think they've really discussed how the narrative is going to play out. Because either it's going to be that, or if it's going to do the Titanfall 1 thing of just having, multiplayer matches with some story moments sprinkled in, but you're still, playing with friends or whatever. I guess that'd be fine, but I'm really hoping they basically shove in a binary domain-esque dinosaur story mode in this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far I'm more interested to play the final version than I was going in. It was more of just like a fun oddity before, but now I'm like, there might be something here.
Yeah, that was kind of my reaction too. Like like you said, like I don't know if it's going to be like a multiplayer game that like one of those rare ones that really hooks me in. We'll see. I don't know. But my first reaction was like positive and stronger than I expected it to be, if that makes sense. I also want to mention that the structure is a little strange because like I'm talking about like Left 4 Dead. If you can imagine like a little bit of that Left 4 Dead energy of like you're a team and you got to make your way from point A to point B while fighting a horde of in this case dinosaurs. The sort of competitive structure of the game is while you're doing that with like 3 or 4 other players, another team is doing the same thing like invisibly. Like you don't actually see them on the map. And you guys are both trying to do the same objectives. And it might be like, hey, you're falling behind, or hey, you're actually ahead of them. And then in the final sort of section of the match, you guys actually all mash up and are in the same place and can like fight each other while you're also fighting dinosaurs. And I thought that was pretty cool. I can't think of a lot of games that I've played that are like that, where you're like racing an invisible opponent necessarily in that kind of game. Maybe it exists and I'm just not thinking of it. But I thought that was cool. I thought that was a good way to make it competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it definitely adds a lot of, I guess, tension, like that element of like you're racing other players basically.
Yeah.
We failed in our attempts, which you can watch on our NGT.
That could have been our secret, man. No one could have known that, you know.
I think it's kind of out
doesn't
there, Kyle.
Go watch the archive of our play session.
I'm trying to promote the channels here, Kyle, at the expense of our perception as competent players.
Yeah, God. That first one was pretty close, though. That second one, they totally destroyed us. Which, by the way, like Marcus said, on the main Game Informer YouTube channel, you can find the archive of our stream where we played 2 full matches of the game. So
yeah, but yeah, I just want to see what else is there.
Same.
The beta seemed pretty bare bones, but understandable. It's just the beta. It's just a few different match types in there. But yeah, it's like I said, it's made me more excited and interested to see how they flesh out that full package.
Same. Yeah. Good first impression for sure. And I believe the beta is open now. Like we were playing sort of it was weird the way they did it, where it's like they let some people in and now they're letting everybody in. It is, at the time of this recording, March 17th. I believe it is open to everyone till Monday the 20th. So
yeah.
Depending on when you listen to this, maybe you can hop in and play a couple matches yourself.
Yeah. Is it weird that it's not a free-to-play game? Does it feel like it should be?
In this era, yeah, it is a little strange. We'll see what that means for it.
Yeah, because they're doing like live server, like there's a battle pass and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't really like, as a consumer, I don't mind paying for a game like that. I don't think it needs to be free, especially if that premium sort of entrance fee makes it not too microtransaction heavy. If it lets you sort of play more of the game and unlock more cool stuff without having to pay out of pocket, like I like that, but I recognize that is a hard nut to crack in 2023. Like,
especially a new IP.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, I guess it is worth.
Only there was an IP, like a relevant IP, Capcom could have used. I don't know. I'm not a businessman.
But you know what? I bet. So in their defense, I bet if they did call this Dino Crisis or just use that name, people would then get mad that like, oh, they're sullying the Dino Crisis name by making this thing. Maybe it's better that they're like, this is its own thing, Yeah,
that's true. And I mean, just because it has dinosaurs are allowed to be in more than Dino Crisis if Capcom's making a game,
Yeah, I don't think
Dino
they own
Crisis
a franchise on
dinosaurs.
Prehistory. And it's also worth calling out, at least for Xbox players, this game is coming to Game Pass. So.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I don't think I knew that. Yeah, that changes everything. All right.
Yeah. It's pretty sure.
Basically free. I actually really despise calling people. Sometimes will just say, "Oh, Game Pass, I can play it for free." It's like, guys, we pay for Game Pass. It is quite expensive.
Yeah, it's yeah, I don't know, but wait, actually, let me. Okay, yeah, it is confirmed. Now you made me question it for a second. I was like, I know I saw that, right? But yeah, it is.
I trust you. You know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Speaking of knowing what you're talking about, Marcus, and things that I know zilch about, literally nothing. And then I just trust you wholly on this front. How's WWE 2K23?
You saying you don't know zilch about the game or wrestling in general?
Oh, wrestling in general.
You know John Cena? Have you heard of John Cena?
The Peacemaker? Yes, I've heard of the Peacemaker.
So you know something. That's like 1%.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I know who The Rock is. I know who John Cena is. And then I know the guy from Glass Onion who's in Blade
Batista.
Runner.
Dave
Batista, who's great. I love Batista as an actor. But man, yeah, I don't know anything about wrestling. So is this game out? Is there a review on the site or not quite? I know it was like kind of weird how they rolled it out, right?
Yeah, not quite. At the time that we're recording, I'm actually writing the review, so I don't have a score ready. So by the time you're listening to this, it might be published or it should be published. We'll see. It's sort of a weird timeline thing because so the game's been out since the 14th. If you pre-ordered the Icon and Deluxe editions, you got a few days early access. But now the game came out today, at least the day that we're recording, the 17th, Friday. It's out for realsies for everyone.
Okay. You can go buy it right now. Okay.
Yes, you can. I will say overall, it's not dramatically different than last year's game. You know, last year was the big comeback after they took a couple of years off to sort of, a lot of things happened. 2K20 wasn't good. Then Yuke's, who was the game's developer, got kicked off, and then 2K brought development in-house, and it's been Visual Concepts who did last year and is doing this game. And this game's pretty identical in terms of the offerings. It's got the same modes between the showcase mode, My Rise, which is the sort of single-player story campaign, universe mode, which is the sort of playground, build your own show sort of thing, managing wrestlers and championships. My GM is still there, which lets you simulate being a general manager. It's all there. There's just been sort of additions and improvements in each of those modes that I think by and large are pretty good. I'll start with Showcase, which is, to me, has always felt like the centerpiece of the mode because it's always focused on the cover athlete. So Showcase, Kyle, it's basically like a playable documentary where you sort of relive the career of whoever the cover athlete is. So this year it's John Cena, who has been on the cover before, but they mix it up in a cool way where this mode focuses on Cena's biggest losses. So they have John Cena, and these modes always have, the stellar production quality of having the sit-down narrations with the athletes. So you got John Cena wearing a very snazzy suit in the studio, sort of narrating each match. And
wait, are they? I'm sorry, like the digital, right? It's like CG, like
no, it's him. Like they filmed him in a studio.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So he's like talking about each match and sort of giving background context and also like putting his opponent over of like, oh yeah, I wrestled Rob Van Dam at One Night Stand and he was amazing, and the crowd was behind him and it was a rough night. And then you play as his opponent, and every match you are beating John Cena.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Yeah, and it's cool because Cena throughout his career, he was the number one guy, and he's a guy that rarely lost. Like, beating John Cena is a big deal, especially if you beat him clean, like without any shenanigans involved. So
yeah, these words make sense to me. Sure.
Yeah, it's like, hey, he's the top guy. It's like beating Goku. I'm trying to speak your language.
Thank you. Okay, right.
Yeah,
but you
like
don't
imagine
throw pocket
beating
sand in his
Goku with
face
no
kind of
shenanigans.
situation, right?
Yeah, like imagine beating Goku with no shenanigans. You just straight up were better than him,
right?
And you're like, wow, that person that did that must be really good. Okay. And that's based. He's the Goku. He kind of is the Goku of WWE in terms of like he's just the pure good guy. But yeah, I think the showcase mode itself is what you would expect. There's mid-match objectives you can complete. Like they'll tell you like, hey, hit a running attack. And if you complete all the objectives or enough of them, you unlock goodies like new arenas or different versions of wrestlers, like the wrestlers you just used in the match. You don't have to do it. You can just win the match and move on. One thing I did miss is that, so one of the coolest things about Showcase is that when you're wrestling, there are points where they'll transition from the endgame match to footage of the real match.
Oh, that's
like
fun.
Seamlessly. So like you'll be like, hit a clothesline, and as soon as you hit the clothesline, it'll transition to the real clothesline, and then you'll watch a clip of the match, and then they'll transition back to the end game match. And what was cool about last year's mode, which was focused on Rey Mysterio, is that during those segments, Rey would narrate, kind of talking about like, oh yeah, I went up to the top rope and I tried this, but Eddie Guerrero beat me to the top and stopped me. That isn't here this time, which I'm disappointed by. Like, the clips are still there, but it's just silent. There's no commentary. And I was like, oh, I kind of wish they had Cena talk about, like, this particular section of the match. Because since there's no, like, the original commentary from the match of, like, the announcers talking, that's not there either. So you're just kind of watching this silent, or not silent, but, like, mostly silent clip of the real thing. And the only thing playing is this not great sort of like stock music that plays for all of the matches. And there's different tracks for each match, but none of them are good. And you can't turn it off, at least not within the game menu. And so I wound up just kind of muting the matches because it's just some of the music doesn't even really fit. Maybe the worst offender is Undertaker and Cena, and like 03's got this really, really bad like rock song. I don't know how to describe it.
But it sounds just like generic, right, is what the problem is. It's like,
it's the music you would get if you just debuted in WWE and you had no character whatsoever. You're just guy in tights #1.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
just like using the Casio keyboard rock selection 1, right, kind of thing.
Yeah, so that was disappointing, but by and large, I think it's a more substantial mode than Ray's showcase last year. It ends on a very goofy and like self-aware note that is like some really funny fan service that I won't spoil, but it definitely ends on a very high note that I thought was very funny. So I think showcase overall is an improvement from last year's version. My Rise is another big leap where this time there's 2 separate story campaigns, and one of them you play as a male wrestler, the second you play as a female wrestler, which is new for the first time. And they're both totally different stories. They're each choice-driven campaigns where in one of them, you're playing as this indie darling who's like this hot prospect that got signed off the indies to WWE, and now you're kind of... They do a cool thing where there's a lot of meta humor and sort of leaning into how the internet fandom thinks, like that hive mind thinks about things, where you're the indie guy that comes in and you've got all this buzz, and immediately WWE's like, okay, we're going to repackage you and change your name and basically make you not resemble the thing that got you over in the indies. And your character's like, I don't know, is that a good idea? Can I just like keep my name and my look? Because that's what people know me by. And then you got like Shawn Michaels telling you like, no, trust the process. We have a really good track record with this, which seems like that's an in joke because that's maybe half true at best. Like, there's been some bad times where they brought in someone that had a lot of buzz and they changed them for the worse.
Okay.
And sometimes they can get over it and sometimes they don't. But just hearing him say like, no, we always knock this out of the park. I was like, they can't really believe that, right? Like, that's got to be a little bit of tongue in cheek there, right? I don't know, but yeah. I think, and in the other mode, you play as a second generation superstar who gets signed, and your aunt was like this legend, and now you're sort of trying to make your own name with other wrestlers accusing you of being a nepotism hire and all that stuff, which is a real thing in wrestling. There's so many people on the roster now that are the sons or grandsons of, famous people or famous wrestlers. I think both modes are enjoyable than last year's mode. They're silly, they're cringy at times, but you know what? So is real wrestling, so it sort of tracks.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing, right? So
yeah, you know what you're signing up for. I think the choice stuff is a nice touch because it kind of gives you incentive to go back and replay them as like, oh, I'm going to be a villain now, or I'm going to be a good guy. The matches themselves are, it's the wrestling matches, but there's side quests you can do. You don't have to. I kind of just beelined and just did the main stuff. I think that's also a step up from last year. It's not like incredible, but it's entertaining.
Yeah. It sounds like it's like a solid entry, right? It's like not changing anything in radical ways, or right? I mean, that's kind of my takeaway. Is that fair?
Yeah. Like, my GM's largely the same. You just have more GMs. You can play against 4 or 3 other GMs. Which is actually one of my favorite modes with my GM. You basically play as a general manager, you're given a budget, you draft superstars, and you're pretty much running the show week to week as you would, I guess, in real life, where you get breakdowns of television ratings and advertising revenue.
Oh, and
cool. You're dealing with superstar contracts, and they're messaging you saying like, hey, I'm unhappy with this. Can you do this? And you can say yes or no. And it affects their morale, and you can have people just straight up quit on you on the spot because you wouldn't give them $100,000 bonus, and you're like, I'm not paying you that money. Bye. I can sign someone else for that. I've always enjoyed that mode. I think it's still fun here. It's still largely the same. There's just a little bit more match types you can choose from, and again, you can compete against a larger number of GMs instead of just one. You can, like, I was competing up against 3 other GMs, so it was like all 4 of us against each other, and you can play with other players. So you can almost treat it like a board game where you each take turns running the show that you're assigned to, and then there's rankings of like, you're the number 1 show right now based on a variety of factors, whether it's ratings, how much money you have compared to everyone else, and there's other goals you can achieve along the way, sort of like in-game achievements that can sort of put you above the pack. Yeah, I'd say that's another one where it's like, yeah, that's largely the same, but it's got some new tweaks that make it more fun. Universe is largely the same. There's some new tweaks there, but I've never really been a big fan of the universe mode just because it's a little too purposeless for me. Especially when my GM offers a similar thing, but with a lot more of the like details and like feedback or just payoff that I personally enjoy. I will say my biggest issue right now is online is not super great. I want to play more of it before I finish my review. I want to play more of it now that the full launch is out, but even playing it in this sort of like, I guess, soft launch, I was trying to play a bunch of online matches. I'm playing on PlayStation 5. I've heard through the grapevine that the Xbox servers weren't super great either. But there wasn't a single match that I was able to finish where the other opponents didn't drop out. And to the game's credit, it does a seamless thing where if somebody's connection drops out, they immediately replace that player with an AI, so you can keep playing the match. And it'll give you a message saying like, hey, super duper 123 dropped out, so you're facing an AI. Is that cool? And they'll tell you like, if you want to quit, we won't penalize you because there's rankings and stuff, you know?
Okay, so they're accounting for it, but it doesn't change the fact that it's like problematic. Like at least they have some sort of like band-aid in there, I guess.
Yeah, and it would happen immediately. Like the bell would ring, and then you see, like, I was playing a War Games match, which is one of the new match types, and you know that has up to like 8 people involved. And within like a minute of playing the match, I hadn't even joined the match yet, and then I saw like literally boom, 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 every person in the match is gone, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm just in a room now with AIs. And so yeah, that's a big issue because yeah, I don't think I finished a single match without the opponent dropping out in some way.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. So I want to check in on it now that it's out. It's hard to believe that it would be better now that there's more people playing. But,
yeah, probably not.
Yeah. But, you know, maybe there's like a day 1 update. I mean, again, technically the game's already been out, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll see. So, but yeah, that's the biggest bummer. But I think overall, it's, if you know, some people maybe unreasonably expect every game in an annual series to be completely different. And it's like, realistically, no, especially when there are things that work. It's like, why take it out or overhaul it entirely? Just iterate on it.
Yeah.
And that's what this game feels like. It's like by and large a good iteration of what they did last year. The controls are pretty much the same. It feels a little bit better to play. There are still some sore spots. Picking up weapons is still a pain in the ass because it's still too finicky. The reversal system can still be a little annoying because there's like 3 of them, and the timing can feel a little off sometimes. But by and large, I think the game is still fun to play, and it's a little bit more fun to play than last year. But yeah, just a solid iteration from last year.
So upward trajectory is where we're at now with this series.
Yeah, we're taking
it was on
steps.
A downward trajectory for a while.
Yeah, this isn't a leap above, but this is a baby step above. We'll
Good.
say.
Hey, that's better than a stumble, right?
Yes.
Cool. This will be the last thing we talk about today. Marcus, you talked a lot about it last week, but kind of in the way that I just want to check in on Wolong one last time. I want to get your sort of definitive final thoughts for Bayonetta Origins, because the review is live now, which was funny. Last week I was like, whatever you're allowed to say about Bayonetta, let's hear it. And then you said a surprisingly large amount about Bayonetta. But yeah, is there anything you want to add other than your review score maybe?
I was going to ask you, I was going to quiz you and put you in the spot. Do you know what the subtitle of the game is?
Well, I wrote it down because I knew I would forget. So it's a Cereza and the Lost Demon, which for my podcast notes, I did Bayonetta, or I Googled Bayonetta Origins and just copy and pasted the title. Like, didn't even like type it over. I just like copied and pasted into my doc because I wasn't going to remember. There is zero chance I would have remembered if I hadn't looked it up prior to this podcast.
Fair, no problem. But my review went up earlier this week. I gave it an 8.75. I've noticed it's also reviewing pretty well across. I think IGN gave it a 9.
You're not alone. It seems like hey, what did I say earlier about Resident Evil 4 remake? Critics like it.
That is true. Critics seem to be digging this. I said in a tweet that this is up there with Hi-Fi Rush as I think the biggest pleasant surprise of the year.
I have not played the any of the 3 Bayonetta games more than about an hour. Like, just for some reason, this just never clicked with me. I don't know why, but for some reason.
Are you a stylish action guy? Like, were you a Devil May Cry guy?
I've played all the Devil May Cries. It just depends. It's like, even those, I'm like, they're fine. Like, they don't really grab me in huge way. All that to say is, like, even though I'm not, like, I wouldn't consider myself a Bayonetta fan, certainly I have nothing against her. I was kind of like, I think I might want to pick this one up. Like, just based on your review and everything, I was like, this seems more my speed than just the straight-on Bayonetta.
And what's nice about this game is that you don't need to be a Bayonetta fan at all to play this, and you don't need to be a stylish action fan or aficionado because it's not that kind of game.
Right.
With it being a prequel, you don't have to worry about 3 games of narrative baggage to, worry about. You can play this game, and maybe you'll be interested in digging into the other games more. But otherwise, you can treat this as a standalone game and just play it and be like, yeah, I'm done. I don't need to play more Bayonetta. I got what I needed out of this. One thing I can delve into a little bit more, for those that don't know, this is you play as a 10-year-old Cereza who's, Bayonetta's kid. It plays as a top-down.
Hold on. This is so stupid that I'm already like, wait, what? Cereza is Bayonetta's kid? I thought you were playing as a young Bayonetta.
As a kid.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Thank you. I thought you said
Bayonetta is not her real
kid.
name.
I was like, I don't know anything about this game.
I mean, we won't get into Bayonetta 3, but Bayonetta is not her real name. But
gotcha. Okay. Sorry to confuse.
No worries. But yeah, top-down adventure game. It's got a lot of brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, in that you're controlling her and her demon companion Cheshire simultaneously a lot of the times. Each of them are controlled with the left stick and the right stick. In combat, which this game has a lot of combat, unbeknownst to some, Cereza can only tie enemies down with her magic. She summons these magic vines that can bind eventually multiple enemies, and then you're using Cheshire, who does all the actual attacking, where it's single button combat. You're going around swiping dudes, tearing them apart. That gets a little bit or more interesting as you collect these elemental abilities that Cheshire has, like a fire mode, an earth mode, and they each come with not only different offensive moves, but also traversal and puzzle solving moves that you use outside of battle. The world is like this very large forest that's arranged sort of Metroid-y style, where it's all these different routes. You'll come across barriers where you're like, oh, I need the water ability to get over here.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes revisiting the world fun. One thing I wasn't able to touch on that I can now is that the world also has a lot of these sort of challenge areas called Tirnanogs. And they're basically like they exist in like an alternate reality. You see them all over the map, and when you find one because you'll see like basically like, oh, it looks like a glass crack in like the fabric of reality.
Okay.
And when you go in, it takes you to what pretty much where the game's most substantial puzzles are. Because they're usually, there's combat arenas, but a lot of them are puzzle where it's like, okay, here's one really big, really elaborate tag team puzzle that you got to get to the other side of. And those are some of the best stuff in the game because they only appear once, the puzzles, but they're really creative. They're inventive. There's one where you're being chased by like a big death trap, so you have to move quickly, and you're guiding both of them down their own sort of lanes. And there's there's a big gap on Bayonetta's path or Cereza's, but Cheshire's path has these sort of like this path that has all these nodes, and every time you step on a block, that same block appears on Cereza's side in like the same position. So you're trying to hit all of the blocks on Cheshire as you're trying to get across to basically build Bayonetta's path. But some of the blocks are inaccessible. So you're trying to hit, or they don't appear. So you're trying to find the right hidden path with Cheshire so that you can get Cereza across as quickly as possible because you're being chased. And I thought that was really cool. And that's kind of like what all the puzzles do. It's like a test of your dexterity because you're controlling two characters, your reflexes, and just your thinking. Like trying to figure out the correct order of operations. Like who needs to go first here? Who needs to go second? How do I, switch back between the two? One can open up paths for the other using their individual abilities. And they're just delightful. I think they strike a great balance of making you think without being overly complicated or overly tedious. They're just a very fun mental exercise. And like I mentioned before, they're all over the place. You don't even have to do all of them. There's a good bit of that are required, but they sort of work like they sort of work like Assassin's Creed towers, where if you clear one, it unveils collectibles in that area of the map.
Okay.
And then
that's
also
nice.
It unveils more of them. So they are incentivized. Like, okay, if you want to find more of the like upgrade, I forget what they're called, but there's a skill tree, but then some skills can only be unlocked where you have to have currency, as well as these additional upgrades for each of them. Like Cheshire has these fruits that are all over the place, and if you eat this fruit, there's some abilities that you can only unlock when you have the fruit plus the currency. So if you do a Tyrannol, it'll reveal exactly where that is on the map.
So there's incentive beyond just the like checking it off a box kind of thing, right? It's like there's reasons to it beyond just like, well, I want to have completed it. It'll actually
and you get stuff at the end for completing them. You'll get like a heart piece or a lot of currency for stuff. So even within them, you're getting rewarded. The game
like
straight
Zelda,
up uses.
Marcus. You're speaking my language.
It is the same system as Zelda. They're not hearts, they're flowers, but it's the same thing where you're finding individual flower petals, and if you fill the flower, you get a whole notch of health. Or you can just straight up find a completed flower and get that. I think I mentioned before to you that the Zelda stuff is also represented whenever you open a chest. There's straight up like a jingle that's very Zelda-esque, and Cereza does the thing where she's like, yeah, I got, you hold it over your head.
That's
and
just good gaming, dude. That's just, come on.
That is peak gaming, and I can see why they added it. I still think to talk about how long the game is. It took me about 15 hours to finish it. So this is not a short game. I know people were like, oh, this is a full price game. It doesn't look like there's much to it. And it's like, no, it's like, it is comparable to a standard Bayonetta game in terms of its length. And how dense it is with things to do. There's a lot to collect. The world is very large. Not open world, but like different open hubs that are all, like I mentioned before, Metroidian, I guess. Metroidian. And
it is funny, we do kind of use that term, like it's like a Metroid, where it's kind of like we could just say like good game design is like the same. Like, it's like,
good. I don't think good
Metroid.
Game design Vania.
It's like, this movie is very Spielbergian. It's like, well, that just means it's well done, technically proficient.
And I've mentioned this before, but I really can't stress enough just how delightful the game is. Like the atmosphere, the presentation, the performances. Like you just want to give Cereza a hug. You just want to give her a high five and give her a hug because she's so insecure and she's still learning her powers. And seeing this version of Bayonetta, who is not the confident witch, almost makes you appreciate older Bayonetta a little more, kind of seeing her arc to that, because you haven't finished all the Bayonetta games, Kyle, but, even the stuff that, Bayonetta 4, a lot of it is tongue in cheek.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, this game is so much more earnest, I guess. It doesn't have the wink at you moments that the main games had. It's like, this is a very earnestly told.
It's genuine, charming, right?
Yeah.
Earnest, like you said.
The relationship with Cheshire and Cereza, watching that develop over time, because, they're sort of reluctant partners, that Cheshire doesn't really like her because he doesn't believe that she's a capable witch, and but he's stuck with her, and he's like actively insulting her and stuff. And then watching them kind of find an understanding with each other. Again, it's like watching a really good Disney film of like, okay, the odd couple that has to kind of figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
But it's done really well here, I think.
Okay, good.
And yeah, just from the music to the visuals, like, this is such a pretty game too. Like, I really can't stress enough how just lovely it is to look at. Just the character designs, the backgrounds. Another cool touch is that because it kind of has this painted, illustrated look, they do a really cool thing with draw distance, where when you're in an area, if you look out into the horizon, if it hasn't rendered in yet, it just looks like a blank page, like a parchment page or a storybook page. But as you get closer, the color sort of fills in like it's being painted in real time almost a little bit. And I just thought that was just a cool artistic touch to sort of represent draw distance.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to try it, honestly. Like I said, not a Bayonetta fan myself. Yeah, nothing against Bayonetta, but like this one, I think I'm gonna check out. It sounds more like my kind of thing.
Yeah, like I know you're really big into Zelda, and like it's action adventure with a lot of puzzle solving.
Yeah, that's my
combat's challenging, but like not even it's like it's got enough bite without being overwhelming. Like, it doesn't ever get to the point of the main games where you really got to be on your game. Right. But it does have like it has enough challenge to sort of remind you of what this game, where it comes from. But they pull back enough to where it doesn't compromise the overall sort of more relaxed vibe that the game has.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah, you can find the full review on GameInformer.com. Marcus gave it an 8.75. That's a good score. Yeah, that covers it, man. We did it. 2-person podcast. We nailed it. Yeah, thanks for tuning in this week. Please tell a friend about the Game Informer show. Check out the website, GameInformer.com. Leave us a podcast review wherever you leave podcast reviews. Leave a comment on the YouTube version of the podcast, which is on our secondary YouTube channel where we put our podcasts and live stream archives. You can catch our super replay of Dino Crisis over there with me and Marcus, which we might be finishing up very soon. We might be done with Dino Crisis here shortly, but every Friday on Twitch, we do that live, and then you can, like I said, you can catch the archive on our secondary YouTube channel. What else we got here? Let's see. Go subscribe to both of those channels if you haven't already. Both the YouTube channels. And also follow Game_Informer on TikTok. I'm uploading a lot of stuff on there, and I'm really trying to get the account verified. So go engage with that account. I would really appreciate it. You can follow Marcus at MarcusStewart7 on Twitter. You can also follow me on Twitter, but you have to Google it. It's a secret. Sorry, I don't make the rules.
It's a lot of work.
Alex should be back next week. Hopefully he's feeling better. Send him some well wishes. Tell him to get better soon. And that does it for the Game Informer show this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Bye.